Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're very glad you joined us today. We have invited Barbara Shermataro, professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, to talk about cybersecurity and its implications for our work from home environment.
Hi there, everyone.
You may ask questions. Sure, Barbara, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with us today. We're just letting our audience know that during the presentation they can ask some questions, Barbara, and you will be addressing them at the end of the presentation or whenever you decide is the best moment to do so. And just a quick introduction of our presenter today. After 30 years as an information technology cybersecurity professional, Barbara joined the world of academia, where she has taught and lectured about cybersecurity, emerging technology, complex dynamic systems, software engineering, and project management. So welcome, Barbara, and we're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know that everyone says, I have my hands full. I have so much else going on in my life. Do I really have to be concerned with cybersecurity? And unfortunately, the attackers out there, they know you're overwhelmed, they know you have your hands full, and they're taking advantage of that. So hopefully through this webinar, you'll learn to understand some of the risk that we have facing us as part of this pandemic, the cybersecurity risks, and hopefully some solutions that we can follow, that you can follow as well. So I'm going to shut off my webcam during the presentation, but I will turn it back on for any questions that you may have. So as I said in this presentation, the goal is to be able to talk with you about some of the increased cybersecurity risks in a couple of specific areas. First, for the remote, the home workers, folks that were not used to working at home, their IT support was not used to supporting them. We also want to talk about the increase in the kinds of malicious software, viruses, worms that's being distributed right now as part of trying to take advantage of this environment. There's a lot of fraud going on that we want to talk about, so you can be very cautious and careful how you respond to some of these unsolicited emails or texts you may get. And then we're also going to talk about the challenges that organizations face in trying to make sure that they still have a secure environment, even with potentially reduced staff. So one of the first items that I want everyone to understand is that, as I said at the beginning, there is no empathy out there from cyber attackers and cyber criminals as to what is going on with COVID-19. In fact, we're seeing a lot of increases in spam, in malware, in websites that have malicious content. We're seeing a tremendous increase in that because cyber attackers know there's folks working from home and that they're concerned with a number of different issues. So they play on a lot of that in these attacks. So you have to be aware that there is an increased attacks going on right now related to this pandemic, and the United States being a country full of a lot of opportunity and wealth, we seem to be targeted more by cyber attackers to try to take advantage of us. So let's start by talking about what are some of the risks that are associated for remote workers. And some research has shown that 62% of employed Americans said that they have worked from home during the COVID-19 crisis. In some cases, it can even be greater than that. Many of these workers had never worked at home before, so they did not have an environment set up at home that was secure, and they were really unaware of the kinds of risks that can be associated with connecting remotely to your organization. Home networks are often less secure than corporate networks. You have a lot of different people using computers for games, for other potentially risky activities. There's no IT support or cybersecurity support kind of guarding over the enterprise. So that increases another risk. And as I said, cyber attackers take advantage of these vulnerabilities in their attempt to be able to steal identities, steal money, gain access. So some of the specific work from home vulnerabilities are insecure home wireless Wi-Fi networks. Not everyone has set up their home Wi-Fi to be secure. Make sure that you have strong authentication, strong password on your home Wi-Fi network. You can certainly contact your provider for more guidance on that. In many cases, there is poor or no password protection on their devices. And remember, we're not just talking about desktop computers. We're talking about mobile devices, phones, iPads. A lot of times these devices do not have the same level of protection. Similarly, a lot of the mobile devices, even though we may have learned that we need to put malware protection, antivirus protection on our computers, many mobile devices, a lot of people operate those, and they're as powerful as many computers, and they operate them without malware protection. Often remote workers share their computers with other members of the family, with children, and so there can be a wide array of different kinds of software and applications that are on that device, computer, phone, iPad. That sharing of that, with every sharing and increased app and increased use of that game and all of that kind of applications, those potentially hold increased risk for the remote worker. And then interesting research has shown that personal assistants such as the Amazon Echo, Google Home, Siri, a lot of those assistants listen to confidential conversations. And if you are working in a very proprietary environment, you want to be very careful about who has access to those kinds of conversations. So what are the kinds of attacks we see? 90%, if I could scream from the mountaintop, I would say, stop clicking on phishing emails. 90% of cyber attacks begin with phishing emails. And these are all kinds of attacks. Some of you may have heard about the recent attack on Twitter, where a teenage kid breached the entire Twitter network and took it over to try to get some Bitcoin, try to get some money. That was the result of a phishing email. That case is spear phishing, where they targeted certain individuals. Phishing emails are the main cause, the main entry point for cyber attacks. We are also seeing increases, as I said in the beginning, in malware, viruses, worms, other malware that are really aimed at trying to steal your credentials, capture keystrokes, because remember, it's not just your home that you're connecting to anymore, it's your business. So if they can gain access, if they can collect these kinds of credentials, they can then gain access to the organizational environment. You've probably heard a lot about insecure use of remote conferencing applications such as Zoom, where people break into them. So you just want to make sure that you follow safe practices when you're using remote conferencing. And then there's always fraudulent applications that masquerade as legitimate ones. You get alerts that there's something wrong with your computer and download this software and it'll diagnose it. In many cases, those are applications, malware, malicious applications masquerading as legitimate ones. Also, one of the big concerns we see going on right now are scams, cyber scams. So there's a lot of charity scams from fake organizations trying to play on the good nature and the generosity and trying to get people to donate money to fake organizations. So you have to make sure you really verify that these are legitimate organizations. There's a lot of health scams. Everybody's very worried about their health and the health of their loved ones. So if they think they can get a quick COVID test or that there's a vaccination or cure out there, they will often go after them. Be very careful because these kinds of scams often lure you in to providing information, even credit card or personal information. There's also phishing and email scams, as I've talked about. They appear to come from a reliable source. Phishing emails used to be a joke. You could tell very quickly that they came from sources that were not legitimate. They're very, very sophisticated now, and they can look as if they're coming from your organization. I've had phishing emails that have appeared to come from the president of our university or my dean or my chair. So you really have to verify, you have to check the source of that and verify that it is a legitimate email. A lot of folks are suffering from loneliness as a result of the isolation that people have experienced through this pandemic. And so there's a lot of romance scams that are preying on that isolation and loneliness. And then, lastly, social media. Social media is a great way to connect. It's also a great way to spread malicious software, misinformation, malware. So you want to also make sure that whenever you connect with a friend or you click on something, you want to be very cautious because social media is full of a lot of malware and other types of cybersecurity risks. So what can you do? Make sure, as I said before, that your home Wi-Fi network is secure. Make sure that you have good security on it and that it's password protected. And as I said, if you've got that connection through AT&T, through Comcast, through some other vendor, they will gladly work with you to give you recommendations. Use a virtual private network to connect to your business. Many remote workers who were working outside of the walls of their organization before this pandemic, they always would work through a VPN. What it does is it creates this private tunnel so that your communications back and forth cannot be seen or intercepted by anyone else. So try to use a VPN. There's a number of VPNs out there. Norton has them. There's a number of them. Your IT support staff may be able to give you some recommendations. Make sure your virus protection is up to date on all of your devices. If possible, do not let other family members use the computer you use for remote work or load software on it. Try to keep that computer isolated from these other potential risks. When you're working, disconnect Amazon Echo, Google Home, Siri. Remove it from the environment where you're having conversations so that you mitigate that risk of those conversations potentially being listened to. If you're working and you're doing work and you're storing it on your home computer rather than your work computer, be sure to back up your home computer. Be sure to make sure that in the event of an outage or an attack of any kind, you have your remote work saved. Follow up the security recommendations when using remote conferencing always require a password. Those are the kinds of recommendations that are out there. And as I say, scream from the mountaintop, do not click on phishing emails. Those results are never good. So what else do we see going on in the midst of this pandemic? We're also seeing that there's fraud. There's unemployment and there's financial fraud. Cyber criminals, cyber attackers see whenever there's money at stake, you're going to see a whole lot of interest. And so we've seen already that fraud has cost the United States at least 77 million, and I'm sure it's much greater than that at this point. Scammers often promise quick access to stimulus checks or unemployment checks. They're going to break through the delays for you if you give them all the information. And then what happens is those imposters can then file claims for those benefits in your name and then you run into the problem if you try to file it of trying to prove that you are in fact the true owner of that information. That can cause even greater delays. We've also found evidence, federal authorities, FBI, other federal agencies have found that organized crime, international organized crime is involved in filing these fraudulent unemployment claims because there's a lot of money at stake. With these unemployment and these other kinds of stimulus and other kinds of financial help that is being given to folks who are struggling. So just be very careful who you give the information to so that you reduce the opportunity for this kinds of fraud. And then also we see that there are threats out there to disconnect your water, your gas, evict you, you're late in bills, you're this or that. If you don't pay right away, then this is going to happen. One of the common ways that scammers will try to get money is they'll tell you that they want you to go and get gift cards to pay these bills. If anyone ever tells you to go and buy cards to be able to pay them for bills, you know it's a scam. No legitimate business requires that you do that. And there have been a lot of folks of various ages. It hits senior citizens, it appears, more than other folks who have been taken advantage with these kinds of scams that are going on. So what are the challenges that organizations face? So your remote workers are now connecting to your organization. Many times the organizations did not really have the staff or the equipment to support the remote workforce. They couldn't send you home with a pre-configured laptop that had all the correct software, was secure, had VPN software. And they didn't really have staff who were able to support this increase in remote activity. So this is one of the challenges that many organizations from small to large are facing in this, trying to keep their business going with remote workers with a potential lack of equipment and staff to support them. There have never been any remote protocols that the remote workers were never used before, so there was never a process about how do you use a VPN or what is the kind of practice to secure your password, or how do you use two-factor authentication? How do you secure? A lot of organizations, if they never had people connect remotely, didn't establish these kinds of policies and protocols. With the home user, the organization no longer has control over who is accessing the information, who is loading information onto that computer, or potentially into the organization's network. Because once you connect to that organization, all of the malware and risks on those remote users are easily transferred to the organization's network. So that reduced control over access, software use, that has also challenged organizations. And malware that spreads, whether or not you're connecting from your phone or an iPad or your computer, if you have malware on one of those devices and you connect into the business, that's going to spread that malware through the business network. And so organizations are struggling to make sure that they are able to respond quickly to the spread of that kind of malware. Oftentimes, there's a lack of skilled staff to be able to monitor and respond to these kinds of increases that we have in cyber attacks, because no longer are these folks responsible for securing their organization's infrastructure. They now have to be able to support the remote workers, and that can pose some great challenges and really put demands on staffs to be able to support them. And if they're not skilled in these areas, then that poses additional risks. And interesting, we find that the high unemployment that we've seen has resulted in a dramatic increase in cyber criminals, because this is a way, it is not that difficult, unfortunately, to be a cyber attacker or cyber criminals. There is free software that you can download that walks you through step by step. What are the kinds of vulnerabilities available in different systems? What's the best attack method I can use to gain access to those systems? So unfortunately, there is not a real high level of investment to move into being a cyber criminal. And so we're seeing people do that to take advantage of the environment that we're in right now. So what are the recommendations for organizations? Establish a virtual private network for remote access. Make sure your remote workers connect through a secure VPN. That will reduce the opportunity for cyber attackers to intercept, particularly if people are working in open environments. Let's say they're connecting at a Starbucks or a restaurant or any other place that has a free Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, that free Wi-Fi opens up all your communications to anyone who would want to tap into it. So you need to be able to communicate through a VPN. Enable multi-factor authentication. This is the use of a second way to authenticate who you are. So passwords are one way. That is what you know. What you have is another way, another potential authentication. And if you add those two together, it increases the level of security. So there are the multi-factor that I'm familiar with is every time I try to log into my university system, I then get a request on my phone, second factor, to authenticate that it is me, in fact, trying to access the university. And when I approve that, I'm able to access. So those two factors, that having something that you know, a password, and having something that you have, and it could be another kind of token, it could be a smart card, but two-factor authentication will definitely increase access control and therefore security into your organization. Another piece that organizations sometimes overlook with the remote worker is that they just give them access to the organizations. All of the information is there. Remember that people should only have access to what they need to have access. What do they need to know to do their job? Remote workers should not connect in to a wide open network. In the same way that you control access to your finances, to your customer, to any of the proprietary information within the walls of your organization, you need to make sure that you also protect it in the remote environment. Because once again, if someone is able to gain those credentials and access as an employee, and that employee has wide open access to everything in your organization, you're opening yourself up for tremendous risks. There are continuous vulnerabilities. Microsoft released a patch yesterday that fixed 100 plus, about 120 vulnerabilities in their software. There is continually vulnerabilities discovered. And so it is important that even if you have workers at home, you need to make sure that in your environment, the organization keeps up to date. Patch all the operating systems, patch the organizations, apply the updates so that you don't open yourself up to these kinds of vulnerabilities. Establish policies for remote access. Establish strong password policies, secure conferencing policies, malware protection. As part of working from home for this organization, these are the kinds of things we expect from you. That can go a long way to giving your employees guidance. And then implement mandatory cybersecurity awareness training. The only effective technique that has proven to be able to reduce the amount of people responding to phishing emails is cybersecurity awareness training. People being aware, made aware of what those look like, how to identify that they're a phishing email. So you want to make sure that you have cybersecurity awareness training for all of your employees. So that basically covers, we covered a lot in a half hour, and I know we did, but if there's any questions, I would love to be able to answer them as best as I can or get back to you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was very interesting, a little bit scary, but I'm happy to hear that. If we get trained and use the VPN, right?
VPN, yeah.
Connection, we can avoid many of these issues. I'd like to apologize to our audience in case they had any delays in audio. It was beyond our control, but that we usually record the presentations, and they will be available in the website, in our website, AOE.
Did we have a problem with audio? Did we have a problem with audio?
I think it was fine. I think it was fine. It was just very minor delays, but I'm sure that everybody understood everything. Everything was
okay. I've never experienced that before. That's not good.
Perfect. I mean, from here.
Oh, someone just said they didn't hear any audio issues. Good. Thank you.
Perfect. So that's wonderful. I just wanted to make sure that. Wonderful. Good. So, and of course, now we're open to questions. If you have any questions for our presenter today, please.
And one piece I'd like to say that people don't always realize, that you have to be a partner in your own security. You have to. There isn't, even if you're the best organization in the world, you cannot secure against every threat. So people have to understand what they are and assume some responsibility for whether it's malware protection or whatever you can possibly do securing your Wi-Fi. You've got to work together to be able to resolve these.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It seems that we don't have any questions from our audience. It seems that
I've got some chat. Okay.
Go ahead.
No. I saw that in the chat that we're experiencing some audio delays. Okay. I didn't have that open before.
The presentation was very clear.
Yeah. Okay.
Presentation was very clear, and the points. The points were clear, and
good.
And the most important thing, what we need to do to avoid these issues. I think the advice was great. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Good.
And if we can wait a couple of minutes more to see if anybody wants to ask any questions. Otherwise, is there any final comments or any important takeaway that you want us you want to emphasize or reinforce for our audience?
Well, and my email is there, so by all means, please feel free to send me an email if you think of a question after this, or you want to follow up with something, and I would love to hear from you. But just, understand that cyber criminals, cyber attackers, they don't feel bad for us. They're taking advantage of the situation as best they can.
Well, then, thank you so much. Okay. And then unfortunately, we ran out of time, so this concludes today's presentation. Just please remember to fill out our brief feedback survey that you will see at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being here, and thanks to all of our participants for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.